Welcome back to PC-88 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-88, the most popular Japanese PC series of the 1980s. A couple of months ago, I made a video about Zavas, the very first RPG made by Glodia in 1988, and today I'm going to play their second RPG, which also happens to be their most famous one, Emerald Dragon. My first experience with Emerald Dragon was as a teenager in the US, in the mid-90s, when I picked up an imported copy of the game for the TurboGrafx, or PC Engine as it's known in Japan. I had only recently begun to play games in Japanese, and my understanding of the language was practically non-existent at the time. Still, I managed to eventually get through the game with the help of an English language walkthrough. I was aware that there was also a version of Emerald Dragon for the Super Famicom, but it was only in the early 2000s that I learned Emerald Dragon was originally a PC game released for 5 different Japanese PCs, the very first version being released in 1989 for the NEC PC-88. This is one of those games that I've always meant to cover on PC-88 Paradise eventually. The game took the Japanese PC gaming scene by storm, and is now considered to be a true classic. You can tell that a lot of PC-88 owners played this one, since it's one of the most common titles for the system. At one point I somehow ended up with 4 copies in my possession, just from buying various sets of used PC-88 games.
If you lived in the suburbs, you were issued it. Came in the mail with samples of Tide.
The game came in this weird cardboard box, where it's hard to tell which side is supposed to be the front cover. An OB strip on the outside would let you know whether you had the PC-88 or the PC-98 version of the game, which both used the same box. The text here declares that this is the day your adventure begins, and that your companions are waiting for you. And while Glodia's previous game Zavas was published by Popcom Soft and promoted by Popcom's magazine, Emerald Dragon was published by Basho House, a smaller company that had worked with Glodia on their previous title, Testament. Inside we have the manual, which is in black and white and contains some cool concept art of the characters. Then we have a fold-out, full-color map printed on high-quality paper. This is somewhat useful while you're playing the game, though there are a lot of locations that aren't marked. The floppies are stored in a nice black plastic case with the title logo. There are 6 discs in all, consisting of the system disc, data disc, visual discs A and B, and the opening and ending discs. So 4 out of the 6 discs are just for the cutscenes. To start, we're simply going to boot the opening disc. Our story begins in the land of Ishbarn, where humans and dragons lived in peace, until someone put a curse on the land, killing off any dragons who dared to live there. The surviving dragons traveled across dimensions to arrive at the land of the dragons. Ages passed, and one day the wreck of a ship from Ishbarn washed up there. The dragons were surprised to find one sole survivor, a human girl. Since dragons' lives are long and children are seldom born, they gladly took her as their own, naming her Tamrin and raising her along with a dragon of similar age named Atrushan. 12 years pass, and Tamrin decides to return to Ishbarn to live among the humans. Atrushan is sad to see her go, but he gives her one of his horns and tells her that if she ever needs him, to just blow on the horn. But Tamrin arrives in Ishbarn to find that it has been under attack by an army of demons for the last 15 years. She tries living there for 3, but becomes more and more troubled seeing the villages slaughtered by the demon general Ostrakhan and his minions. Tamrin decides it's time to fight back, and blows the horn. This is easily one of the most epic openings to ever appear on the PC-88. A demo disc which just plays this opening on repeat was distributed to computer shops to advertise the game. The pixel art makes good use of the limited color palette, and the music here is some of the best in the game. Emerald Dragon thankfully uses the soundboard too, and with the similar sounding albeit monaural soundtrack of Zavas still in recent memory, I practically got goosebumps listening to some of the music in this opening. When the opening ends, we're instructed to insert the system disk in drive 1 and the data disk in drive 2 before pressing reset. Wow, what a jarring and unceremonious way to start the game. It's supposed to represent Atrushans descending down to Ishbarn, but just comes off as kinda cheap and silly to me. The music doesn't really help either. Atrushan, as you may have gathered, is now in human form. In the console versions, they added a whole prologue in the beginning to show how this comes to pass, but in the original, it just begins here with no explanation, though it will be explained soon enough. Atrushan has to go find Tamrin, who should be nearby. On the way there, you might even encounter a battle or two. I'm really glad now that I suffered all the way through Zavis first, since it allows me to really appreciate just how much better Emerald Dragon is, in almost every possible way. While you could be forgiven for thinking the battle system is identical, here you actually get to control one of the characters, and most importantly, the battles move at a much faster pace. You no longer have to sit there watching your characters constantly miss as they attempt to land the huge number of hits each enemy takes. The battle music in Emerald Dragon gets me pumped too. Unlike in Zavis, setting the battle message speed to the max in this one makes it so that you don't even need to keep tapping the button in order to keep things going as fast as possible. Sure, now I can't read any of the messages before they disappear, but it's totally worth it. Sadly though, the gamepad support here is even worse than in Zavis. Only the D-pad works, and the trigger buttons do nothing. Who wants to keep reaching over to the keyboard just to dismiss the text box when you talk to an NPC? So again, I had to use the exact same keyboard emulator setup that I used in Zavis. I know it's pointless complaining about a game made 35 years ago, but come on, if you're gonna bother having gamepad support at all, you might as well do it right, you lazy Okay, but there is something really cool they implemented here. Hidden deep within the system menu is the RAM disk option. Enable this and you'll have to wait about 20 seconds for a bunch of data from the system disk to be copied into the RAM of the soundboard too. But once this is done, you can enjoy almost zero disk access before and after each battle. This has to be done each time you boot up the game, but it's definitely worth doing. I wish more games had this. It's a creative use of the RAM on the soundboard too, which is usually used for storing PCM samples. But let's get back to Atrushan. He finds Tamrin's house in a village not far from the beginning of the game. Here we have our first cutscene, so we're asked to insert Visual Disc A in Drive 2. Atrushan is thrilled to see Tamrin, but of course Tamrin has no idea who he is, since she's never seen Atrushan in human form. So Atrushan removes an item called the Silver Scale, transforming him back into a dragon. But under the curse of Ishbarn, it's incredibly painful to be a dragon here, so he quickly changes back. Over dinner, Tamrin explains the plight of the humans, and Atrushan agrees to help. He tells her that one of the elder dragons back home told him to seek out the Emerald Dragon if he wants to stand a chance of victory, but the elder did not explain why, or even who this Emerald Dragon is. Atrushan and Tamrin set out the next day, and the village elder introduces them to Barsom, who will make a good additional attacker for now. But where to go first? Let's try out the discussion command in the menu. This initiates a short character dialogue where they discuss the recent events of the game and/or what to do next. A game that tells you where to go. What a concept! Obviously, this is useful when you turn the game back on after a long break, but not only that, sometimes it's the only way to find out what you have to do, and the dialogue here is very character-driven, helping to flesh out each party member's personality and motivations. However, the discussion command's usefulness varies a lot. Sometimes it's pretty vague, only giving the player hints, and still other times it just trails off after discussing the previous events. I tried to play the game without a walkthrough during the earlier parts, but wasn't able to for very long. Here Barsom directs us to a cave, where we can find our fourth party member, a wizard named Bagin. When inside dungeons, the battle BGM is different. The music in Emerald Dragon is similar to Zavis, having the same main composer and using a lot of the same older sounding FM instruments, despite the stereo sound. So it maybe hasn't aged quite as well as something by say Falcom or Yuzo Koshiro. I still love the music overall, though most of it during the gameplay doesn't quite reach the peaks of the opening and ending. The sound effects, however, can be shockingly irritating. Though I got used to them. Many are reused from Zavis, and even the treasure chest melody is taken directly from Zavis. Having lots of party members is nice, but in this game only Atrushan and Tamrin gain experience. It was probably done this way since the other party members really do come and go a lot in this game, which was still a fairly novel concept at the time. I guess they figured there's no point in characters leveling up if they're just gonna leave. Though this does begin to feel a little weird toward the end when some of the temporary characters become not so temporary. And one of the main things that makes Emerald Dragon difficult is the fact that it's game over if even one character should go down. This may seem awfully strict, but at least you're allowed to save your game anywhere, so save often and you'll be ready to try again right away, near where you left off. Like in Zavis, you can use any old disk as a user disk to store up to 9 saves. But Emerald Dragon also gives you 1 game save on the system disk. I did my best with the user disks for a while, but after dying and loading a lot, I got sick of the constant disk changing and ended up mostly using the system disk to save. Normally I would prefer to use a backup disk instead of writing data to the original, but these Glodia games have some really nasty copy protection that I wasn't able to get around this time. So I broke my personal rule, but it probably isn't going to do any real harm to the disk, and at least it is a really common game. So we end up visiting the King of El Bard, the only kingdom in Ishbarn, and he gives us our real party members to replace these 2 randos we currently have. His son, Prince Hathram, and Hathrum's handmaid, Farna. Since there's room for a max of 5 party members, Bagin can stay for now. By the way, the scrolling on this floor design really trips me out. Whoa! But overall, I think the scrolling in Emerald Dragon looks great for a PC-88 game. A lot of people commented on my video that they liked the scrolling in Zavis, which I guess does look better than most PC-88 games. Emerald Dragon seems to use yet another scrolling algorithm entirely, which I think looks even better. The party needs to journey through a mountain fortress to get to the next overworld map of the game. You're given the general direction where the fortress is located, but it's pretty hard to find. A lot of the terrain in this game feels like it was never designed to be explored by humans, but this is exactly where you need to go in order to find the fortress. And you need to hug the edge of this mountain range the whole time. Take one step in the wrong direction and you'll get attacked by enemies way too strong for your current level. And I mean, you'll die no matter what. Worst of all, the run command seems to always fail when you're in a battle with strong enemies. What is it with games not allowing you to run from difficult battles? Those are the battles you're going to want to run from the most. But at least, unlike in Zavis, you can also run from battles in the dungeons, just like in any normal game. One good thing the game does carry over from Zavis though, is that random battles stop occurring when your level is much higher than the enemies around you. In the next region, the party hears rumors of a dragon who has managed to survive deep within a cave nearby. At the cave entrance, Bagin says he's not feeling well and will wait there for the party. In the cave, we finally get to another cutscene where the party finds a large open chamber that turns out to be the home of a huge dragon. Atrushan stops Hathram from attacking and asks the dragon if he is the Emerald Dragon. The dragon is taken aback and asks how a human could know that name. Atrushan admits that he's also a dragon, disguising himself using the silver scale. Hathram and Farna are shocked to learn that Atrushan isn't human, but they get over it pretty quickly. The dragon explains that he is the Silver Dragon, and that he happens to be the one who made the silver scale. And looking closely at the dragon, Atrushan notices that all his scales have been stripped away. The Silver Dragon tells them that to find the Emerald Dragon, they will need to seek out the 5 pieces of the Emerald Grace, of which the silver scale is one. That is all he will tell. Back at the cave entrance, Bagin has disappeared, leaving only his staff, which only Farna can equip. The party will go searching for him later, but first they end up getting involved in the Resistance army, helping them to attack the demon general Ostrakhan. We corner him, but end up fighting one of his henchmen instead, while Ostrakhan flees to attack the kingdom of Elbard. Hothram, unable to stand by while his father's kingdom is under attack, leaves the party while the rest go after Bagin. The party needs to travel through a maze-like forest in order to get to a cave where they have figured out Bagin was headed, and they enlist the help of Yaman, the son of the chief of a local tribe of the forest. He gives verbal instructions along the way to help you through the forest and to the cave. There, they find Bagin injured, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to put the spoiler warning here already. The plot of this game has a lot of interesting twists and turns along the way, and I really don't want to spoil anything for those who want to play a version of this game for themselves. For those of you who just want to know what happens though, let's continue on. We get another cutscene where Farna runs to the injured Bagin, calling him father. So we learn here that Bagin is Farna's father, but then immediately learn that he isn't her real father. Farna's real father saved Bagin's life long ago, but died shortly after. To repay his debt to her father, he raised Farna, who was just a baby at the time, as his own. Bagin had left the party earlier in order to defeat a demon who has been ravaging the village of Farna's real father, but has now suffered this mortal wound. The party then has to defeat the demon themselves. Next, the party goes after Hothram back at the kingdom of Elbard, and Yaman leaves the party. They're joined instead by a general of the resistance named Khosra. Yeah, apparently this is how you spell his name. The katakana here seems to indicate that the K is silent, but I looked up the original Persian pronunciation and apparently it isn't. Glodia likes to get their character names from Middle Eastern mythology. In fact, the name Shuffleners I had so much fun with in my Zavis video should actually be spelled like this. Thanks again to the commenter who made me aware of this. The party learns that Ostrakhan is waiting for them in a mansion in Elbard. There, Ostrakhan shows the party that he has Hothram captured inside an orb. If they want to see him again, they'll have to bring Ostrakhan a powerful jewel left behind by the ancients, called the Avesta. It's hidden deep within a forest, so the party employs the help of Yaman again. Yaman borrows a forest map from his father. This and some of the other regions of the game have maps that can be obtained and used by pressing the help key on the keyboard. They can be quite useful, but not really when it comes to navigating the forest mazes in this game. If you can tell which of these little paths are connected, then you're better at reading this than I am. The full maps available online nowadays work much better. At the end of a second ridiculous forest maze is a dungeon where we fight a zombie dragon guarding the Avesta. And here is the most infamous bug in the PC-88 version. Or rather than a bug, it's more of an oversight by the developers. To start the fight with the zombie dragon, you walk up to the Avesta, but after you defeat him, you have one of the pieces of the Emerald Grace, the Golden Fang, right in front of you. So of course your first instinct would be to pick up the Golden Fang, right? But if you do so, you get warped back to the entrance of the dungeon, and if you then go ahead and exit, the game becomes unbeatable. What you're actually supposed to do after defeating the zombie dragon is walk up and grab the Avesta first, before touching the Golden Fang. This was fixed in the PC-98 and all later versions of the game, by making you obtain the Avesta automatically when you defeat the zombie dragon. The party catches up with Ostrakhan again, and it seems like there should be a cutscene here like there is in the PC Engine version, but instead it's described entirely in text. Atrushan throws the Avesta toward Ostrakhan, and time seems to stop for Farna as she watches Ostrakhan drop the orb holding Hothram, and it shatters on the floor. The party defeats Ostrakhan, but he gets away for now. Farna, too saddened by the loss of both Bagin and Hothram, can no longer find the will to fight, and leaves the party. Khosra also decides to regroup with other members of the resistance, but in his place, he gives us his strongest warrior named Karshwarl. Flows right off the tongue, doesn't it? The party hurries on to a new area of the game in pursuit of Astrakhan. There, after liberating a town, there's a surprise cutscene where the party decides to throw a party with the townspeople. But during the festivities, a demon archer peers out from the bushes and lands an arrow right in Yaman's chest. A mysterious long-haired man in a hat appears to help, but it's too late. The party holds a funeral for Yaman. Boy, a lot of party members die in this game. The mysterious man introduces himself as Saoshyant. Okay, I'm doing my best here with these Middle Eastern names. He's looking to retrieve a bow that was taken from him by Astrakhan that he received from a great wise man. Oh, he wants his bow back. Well, that works as motivation, I guess. Anyway, this is actually one of the core party members of the game, so get used to him. He takes the party to visit the wise man who gave him the bow, and there they learn that Hathram is not as dead as he seems. The orb that Astrakhan dropped before their eyes was a fake. How this wise man who's been hanging around here on this mountain knows this, I have no idea, but he seems pretty confident about it. Next, Khosra joins the party again as the party prepares to make their attack on the desert castle where Astrakhan is residing. The castle has 2 towers where you'll need to try all the levers until you pull the right ones. Pull a wrong lever and the room fills with gas, with a message telling you to reset the game. Hey, that's not very nice. Why not just bring up a load menu? Now I have to load the data from the system disk to this onboard 2 again. Anyway, when we reach Astrakhan, Saoshyant introduces himself. Hello. My name is Saoshyant. You took my bow. Prepare to die. Khosra and Karshwarl also tell some sob story about having their family members killed by Astrakhan or something, but it's not like they lost a bow or anything, right? When they defeat Astrakhan, he harnesses the power of a demon to let loose a burst of energy, which Karshwarl blocks with his body, killing him instantly. Man, a lot of party members die in this game. The party then has to fight the demon as sort of the second phase of this boss. When they win, they get the orb containing Hathram, as well as Saoshyant's stupid bow back. The bow gives Saoshyant a powerful attack, but for most of the game he only gets 1 shot per turn. The party decides to take the crystal containing Hathram to a famous doctor, and if you simply do this like you're told, you'll miss out on the first of 3 hidden subquests in the game. The only way to trigger it is to go back to one of the earlier towns at this, and only this, specific point in the game. Once you've activated the quest, the discussion command will bring up a special window indicating that you're in a subquest. In this one, you have to help a girl get medicine for her mother, and if you succeed, you get a special weapon for Hathram. They bring Hathram to the doctor.
Just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
And he gets revived and rejoins the party. Farna will be overjoyed, but it will be a while before we see her again. For now, the current party makes a long journey around the remaining regions of Ishbarn and visits a priestess of the sea and a priestess of the mountains. These priestesses, it is explained, are descendants of the Horus people, the ancients of Ishbarn, who due to their long lifespans and advanced technology were often considered gods. The first priestess of the sea has us bring her an item called the teleposter from a nearby cave, and she then takes Tamron aside to tell her a secret, but we won't find out what that secret is quite yet. The priestess of the mountains gives Saoshyant a leather cloak soaked with her own blood, which will make him better able to harness the full power of his bow. The priestess also shows the party the back door of her shrine, which leads to the fortress of the Dark Lord Galshia. Then Galshia appears, declaring that the priestess has betrayed him and brings her to her end. And so begins the Fortress of the Dark Lord, which is by far the largest dungeon in the game so far. Wow, we're going to defeat the Dark Lord and we haven't even found the Emerald Dragon yet? Before the battle, the Dark Lord reveals the real villains of the game. He was summoned to this world by the Ancients, the Horus, who are actually still alive in the mountains to the west. This is the most difficult battle of the entire game, I think. Generally, the auto battle in this game is actually pretty good, but this is one of the few parts where it made me genuinely frustrated. Tamron has an overpowered summon spell that would definitely kick this boss's ass, but for some reason she'll never use it here. She did also have a powerful laser attack by this point, which definitely helps a lot, but again she uses it pretty randomly. Whenever you get game over, it says that Atrushan failed due to his poor strategy, but often what it really should say is that he failed due to his bad luck. I tried for a long time against this boss, but ultimately I ended up having to go all the way back through the dungeon into a town to pick up a bunch of items to help me out. There is a lot of slow traveling around the map in this game, by the way. It would be nice if there were some sort of warp item or spell. Anyway, after finally defeating the Dark Lord, the palace crumbles and it looks like the party is done for. But Tamrin uses the teleposter to teleport the party out of the palace. Then Tamrin admits to Atrushan the real reason she set off on this quest in the first place, to find out who she really is. And she got the answer from the Priestess of the Sea earlier, who told her she's the only one who can use the teleposter. Tamrin quickly realized what that must mean. She isn't human. She's a Horus. So now the party is back at El Bard, and everyone is happy like we finished the game or something. Farna, we are told, went looking for the party, and should be somewhere in the western desert. Before looking for her, you can find the 2 remaining subquests of the game, which will give you special weapons for Hathram and Farna as rewards. When we finally find Farna, she can't hold back the tears, though she's too proud to admit it and says she just has sand in her eyes. In case it isn't clear, by the way, Farna and Hathram aren't really a couple, but Farna has unreciprocated feelings for Hathram, and Hathram on the other hand is shown at several points to be kind of a player. Anyway, we finally have the core party of the game assembled. They travel to the northern part of the desert and obtain the sacred sword called the Vendidad, which contains the spirit of the Emerald Dragon, and can talk. It tells the party that the Emerald Grace, which the party now has all 5 pieces of, are the body of the Emerald Dragon, and can be used to resurrect him. However, doing so will unleash the power of the Avesta, which the Emerald Dragon sacrificed his own body to seal away long ago. The Avesta is now in the possession of the Horus, and Vendidad has opened the gateway to their city. The party finds this gateway in the desert, but upon passing through they are immediately apprehended. When they notice a mark on Tamrin's arm, though, they immediately let only her go. Their leader, Tiridates, welcomes Tamrin, the true heir to their throne, back to her kingdom. The rest of the party is taken to a cell, but it isn't long before Tamrin comes to let them out, saying it's time to launch a counterattack. The final area of the game is the Horus City, which is basically a giant fortress. You can't return to the previous parts of the game anymore at this point, but you can pick up unlimited healing items in this cell, and all the best equipment in the game can be found within the labyrinth if you're willing to look. In the civilian part of the city, you can talk to the regular Horus folks, and they don't seem to be evil, just under the rule of their evil leader, Tiridates. He is, of course, the end boss of the game, and before the battle, he reveals all. He is the one who sank the royal ship, killing Tamrin's father, the king, and leaving it to wash up in the land of the dragons, not knowing that Tamrin was still alive. Tiridates is also the one who created the Avesta and used it to place the curse on the land, preventing dragons from living there. So anyway, the end boss was a complete joke for me. Granted, I was on a really high level, but it probably would have been even higher if I had spent more time wandering without a walkthrough. Tamrin now has a confusion spell, and it works even on the end boss. And weirdest of all, it never wears off. So once Tamrin randomly casts the spell on the boss, it's all over. He can't even fight back. For his second phase, he unleashes a demon that was sealed away with the Avesta, but this phase has the same weakness as the first. The confusion spell works, so it's finally time to insert that ending disc. The power of the Avesta is about to explode out of control, but Atrushan uses the Emerald Grace and the sword to revive the Emerald Dragon in some cool black and white animation. The Emerald Dragon instructs the party to hop on his back. Tamrin asks, but what about the city of the Horus? And the Emerald Dragon replies that even gods must face their fate. The party flies away on the dragon while Tamrin mourns the loss of her people. Safely back in Ishbarn, the Emerald Dragon announces that he will return to the land of the dragons, but asks Atrushan what he wants to do. Since the silver scale that made him a human is now part of the Emerald Dragon's body, he can make Atrushan a human permanently, and so Atrushan chooses to live among the humans in Ishbarn. And in order to lighten the mood, Hathram announces that he will return to Elbard and pick up some lovely ladies. Farna begins to speak, but Atrushan interrupts and says, "It's your job to keep an eye on Hathram, right?" As for Saoshyant, he offers to continue to journey along with Atrushan and Tamrin, to which they agree. The game wraps up by saying that their journey is just beginning, which I really hope is not the case, because this game was long enough. The credits sequence has some really nice music, monochrome photos of the developers, and messages from each of them. The game locks up here on the final screen. To see a secret message from Glodia founder Osamu Ikegame, hold the keys E and D while booting the opening disc. He says that he wanted to include a sound test for the game, but decided not to since it would require switching discs a lot in order to hear all the tracks. Instead, he announces his intention to release a separate music disc for the game, which will have no copy protection, so that people can copy it freely for their friends. That disc was distributed only to people who answered a questionnaire included in Comptique magazine in 1990. The disc includes a lot of cool pixel art of the characters, and I used it to capture most of the background music for this video. It's unfortunately missing one track. The PC-98 version was the only version released almost simultaneously with the PC-88 version, a mere 10 days later. Unfortunately, this is probably not the version you want to play. First of all, the PC-98 had no equivalent of the Soundboard 2 yet at this point, so you won't get the full arrangements with all the sound channels and stereo sound. Secondly, this version is also said to have a lot of new issues. For instance, using Farna's secret weapon you obtained from the third subquest will cause a number of game-breaking bugs. The game is running faster and smoother than the PC-88 version here, but that's mostly because my PC-98 is a lot faster than the PC-98s it was intended to run on. I'd say choose the PC-88 version over this one if you can. The X68000 version wasn't released until a year later, and was the first to change up the art style, due to the original visual designer Akihiro Kimura moving to write stuff. The cutscene graphics were all redone and the opening was given more of a hand-drawn style. The soundtrack is also arguably better than the Soundboard 2 version, though it's kind of a matter of preference, and the sound effects are a little less irritating here. The program was also fully reviewed and this one is said to be virtually bug-free. The MSX2 version is kind of an odd beast. It was released shortly after the X68000 version and uses that version as the basis for the cutscenes. But for the actual game, instead of completely redrawing the graphics for the MSX like most MSX ports, here it looks like they took the original PC-88 graphics and zoomed them in, and the MSX2 struggles to handle this. It doesn't seem to run any faster on an MSX Turbo R either. The game fortunately uses the FM pack for the music, but unfortunately it has no music at all if your MSX2 only has PSG sound. I couldn't imagine myself playing very far into this version today, especially considering the vastness of the world maps. Maybe this is one where you just had to be there in the early 90s as an MSX owner. This version does apparently have language patches in both English and Spanish. The FM Towns version came much later, in 1992, and is a very interesting version of the game indeed. Being released on a CD-ROM, it was the first to incorporate CD audio and voices to the cutscenes, with a completely different voice cast from the PC Engine version. Outside the cutscenes, the music uses FM sound almost exclusively, rather than CD audio. The game itself seems to be based roughly on the X68000 version, but with tons of improvements everywhere. This very much feels like the final version of the original game. Definitely a version I wouldn't mind playing a little more than I have. It's been just sitting in my FM Towns collection for the last 20 years. The PC Engine version was released relatively late in the system's life, in 1994, and was developed by Alpha System, who made a number of games for NEC and Hudson. This is the first port that gets into remake territory, with completely new cutscenes and added content. And interestingly, rather than an arrangement of the original soundtrack, this one has an all-new high-quality soundtrack of its own. I understand why they felt the need to replace the music. The original could come off sounding kind of silly, and the new soundtrack feels more epic. But I also love the original soundtrack now too, and can't help but mourn the loss of it a little bit here. But I guess in the end, more good music is a good thing. You can set the walking speed really high in this version, which is great, and lots of little tweaks like warping and fast travel were added to make things less cumbersome. The game is reportedly much easier than the PC versions. Oh yeah, and I guess I had better mention that it can also use the arcade card for some minor disc access improvements. It's almost like they're carrying on the tradition of the Soundboard 2 RAM disc from the original. Overall, while a lot has been changed, this is a great version of the game in its own right, and most would consider it a huge improvement. The Super Famicom version is the only other version that has an English patch besides the MSX, but I haven't played very far into this one myself. It was also developed by Alpha System, and is thus primarily a port of the PC Engine version. The BGM, for instance, is a Super Famicom arrangement of the PC Engine soundtrack, rather than the original. The cutscenes had to be majorly cut in order to make them fit on a 16 megabit cartridge, and most of them have been replaced by character sprites talking to each other, like in most Super Famicom RPGs. There are some Mode 7 parts, and the overworld layout has been simplified a lot, probably because the huge world maps were one of the most disliked aspects of all the previous versions. This is also said to be the easiest version of the game, including treasure boxes littered everywhere. One other big change is that all characters can now level up, not just Atrushan and Tamarin, and the battles have attack animations and voices. There are just so many differences. I apologize if I missed anything important. In many ways, it feels like a reimagining of the PC Engine version, but with so many additional changes, there's really very little of the original Emerald Dragon left. It's really kind of its own thing. Emerald Dragon is considered by many to be a legendary JRPG, and for good reason. The amount of character interaction, cutscenes, and epic storytelling was virtually unprecedented in 1989. The only other PC-88 game from the same era that comes even close that I can think of is the first Burai game. And while I like that one too, I think most people would agree that of the two, Emerald Dragon is the true classic. The game definitely has its issues. The auto battle can cause some pain now and then, and the world maps are too large. I would recommend keeping a walkthrough handy if you don't like wasting your time. The game is definitely long for its time, but it took me much less time to complete than Zavas, and was of course much more enjoyable. There are plenty of great ways to enjoy Emerald Dragon. The PC Engine version came highly recommended to me when I bought it, and maybe because my expectations were a little too high, I remember liking it enough to finish it, but not quite loving it. Something about it felt kind of off to me. The music, cutscenes, and characters were certainly epic, but the world maps and game progression felt like they didn't quite belong in a mid-90s RPG. Maybe not player-friendly enough. And it's no wonder really, because the game was originally from 1989, and a lot was still there from the original. I can certainly appreciate this version a lot more now, but the game makes the most sense to me as a 1989 title on the PC-88, which it feels like it was designed for. So while my impressions of Emerald Dragon will always be colored by that first experience playing through the PC Engine version in the 90s, I'm really glad that I finally took the time to play through the original on the PC-88. It is, without a doubt, a classic among classics on the system. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-88 Paradise. This one took a lot of time and work to make, but the game was really fun and rewarding to play. Here's the current list of patrons and YouTube members helping me to keep this channel going. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll be back with another one not too far in the future.